Now sitting in Limassol in a beautiful park by the ocean. Cities behind me, the ocean that way. Going back into the contemplation of the Yoga Sutras, we were leaving off with the bulk of memory, like our hard drive. It contains tons of everything that has ever happened to us, everything we've learned, all of the experiences we've seen, we've heard, we've felt, we've tasted, we've smelled, from all the senses, making up a huge amount of memories, different memories, and a continuum of all the memories of our life. So as we go beyond that, we step into the next series where Patanjali is describing a little bit about how we bring this to a halt. And he mentions that these mental activities are restrained by the practice of yoga. Let's say the practices of yoga, because there are many different practices. We are all quite familiar with the Hatha Yoga, the asanas and stretches. Globally, that's become acceptable and known kind of everywhere. People are practicing this, and this is what they think yoga is. It's one form. It is part of yoga. It's not what Patanjali is specializing in or talking about. He's dealing with the mind again. So by the practices, the various practices of yoga, we can pull our conscious attention out of this mind game and bring the mind to a peaceful state. It's less active because we are not paying attention to it. We're simply being the observer and taking our observation into the sense of feeling or seeing or hearing without the mental modifications. Focus. And in Hatha Yoga, it's the focus on feeling the sensations of the body. That's pretty simple, and many people are realizing this is one way of doing it. So this is one aspect, and then he mentions the second thing. First, the practices of yoga, and second is the non-attachment. So non-attachment needs to be understood in a deeper way of what it is. It's not just that you're not attached with your material objects, although that is part of it. You have a lot of possessions and you spend all your time thinking about it, worrying about them. That's really a distraction to your spiritual practices, to getting into any state of meditation. You need to have a clarity, a detachment from this. And then the detachment, again, is more from your thoughts than from the things. Because your thoughts will be reminding you of all the things you have, of what you need to do in relation to them, as far as keeping them, as far as protecting them from thieves or whatever, or polishing them up if they get dirty, if it's a material thing. All part of it. So this non-attachment. The yoga poses and movements takes conscious attention out of thinking wheel, out of the modifications of the mind, and temporarily holds it on body sensations. Now the other techniques in the practice of yoga involve visual concentration, mantra and sound formulas, verbal focus on the sutras, which is what we're doing here and now, and then contemplation on whatever our mental content is. And then we go into this whole memory thing, which is everything we've ever experienced. So that's huge in itself. In contemplation, we go through that and we're paying attention specifically to all the thoughts and ideas and memories that are useful to us, and then discarding some of the stuff that has no relevant value for our present life. So when we add to this the study of yantra yoga, as the mathematics and the cosmic symbolism, sacred geometry, we're focused on that, and it takes us away from the verbal process of remembering something else and making a fantasy out of it. All part of working with the mind. Then we have the mandala creation, actually drawing mandalas, which takes focus and concentration. In fact, anything that takes focus and concentration takes us out of the mind game. You can be skiing downhill at high speed, and you got to be totally in the moment, watching everything you're doing physiologically, physically streaming through the environment. Or else, if you're distracted by a thought, you can too easily crash and go tumbling and whatever. So this concentration on what you're doing is very much part of it. And then we can practice on pranayama, taking nice deep breaths. And what do you notice when you do that? There is a lot of feeling and sensation involved. We are feeling the breath come in, feeling the breath go out, maybe feeling the prana flow coming into our brain. So it's an experience in the moment, now. We don't need to analyze or think about it. The focus is just on having this experience. So apply that to the Hatha Yoga, the asanas, the mantra, the painting of a mandala. You're taking conscious attention to this or to that or to the other. And the mind game is going to take your conscious attention off into the daydream world, into the memories. And this is where we can learn to be focused. The practices of yoga allow us to take our attention onto these other things, which can bring us many great benefits, which can bring the mind to a much more peaceful state of being. So there's no shortage of techniques and methods to apply in the whole spectrum of yoga. It's a huge field. Even from totally studying the sutras or any of the old texts that have information about yoga, and you're focused on that, that's an intellectual study. It's not jumping into memory and imagination. This is the worst part of the mind game. It takes everybody away quite often for a whole lifetime of being somewhere else. So after these practices, the next thing he's mentioning is non-attachment. He's saying the practices of yoga and then non-attachment. Attachment, even our memory is made of attachments to all of the experiences we've had, and we're remembering this. And then we go for a social evening with some friends. We're talking about what happened last week and the experience we had here or in our travels where we went. We're going back into memory, bringing the memory up, and then this becomes our focus. And we're talking about it, sharing it, and now of course people are sharing things on their phones to everyone around the world all the time, keeping you in this place of being in memory, sharing it, maybe creating a future possibility, but everything is away from what are you experiencing right now. So no shortage of these things either. We have so many memories, so much to share, and of course now so many friends. How many friends do you have on Facebook, you can say, and whatever. Then there's Instagram and all the other things. So in this observation, we are the observer of these thoughts. And when you have a beautiful thought, a nice memory comes up, and the thought of recreating this kind of a memory, building a new possibility, another fantasy, and going into that, this is another distraction. So you detach. A beautiful memory might come up, but without attachment, it comes up and goes away. It's crossing your mind, crossing the screen of your mind, and if you're not attaching to it, it will dissipate. It'll go away. And the next thought will come up, and without attachment, that one will also just float away. It's when you attach that your mind will create, and from that attachment bring in another related thought and possibility, and create this chain of thoughts from the memory to all these possibilities, and it becomes this fantasy. So detachment from the emotional content that comes with the idea. Beautiful ideas, nice fantasies. We do get attached to this. You have a nice romantic fantasy, for instance. Oh my God, that would be so nice, and The mind will come up and create beautiful pictures and scenes. It's your attachment that allows the creation of all of this. Detachment lets it go. And then you come back to the present. And you can come back to the present with a yoga practice. Take the next breath. Feel it coming in. Feel it going out. That's in the moment. And being in the moment with all of our experiences, from all of the senses, from any one of them, is what yoga is all about. Because then your consciousness is having the experience in 100% experience, not just partial 100%, 80%, 70%, 50%, and then we're remembering something else. And if you're observing this, you'll see that you can be focused on one thing and the mind will come up with a bit of a shadow of something else. So observing the thoughts, the visual aspect of the thoughts and how a memory comes up with a picture, that can be a little bit in front. It's not full opacity. It's vague and like a clouded image in front of what you're seeing with your senses. And that varies considerably depending on how strong the thought is, how beautiful, to the point where you can almost not see what's out there and you're seeing what your mind is projecting. So become aware of this process of the mind, of how we think. And then you're applying the non-attachment to this thinking beautiful thoughts that have emotional content, that moves your heart, and oh yes, I want this. So then we're getting into creating a desire, and the desire creates the need to go and fulfill that desire. So as you study how the mind is playing games with your consciousness, you can begin to realize it's a lot of interference. You know why Patanjali talks about it as modifications. Your mind is modifying everything and bringing up other images and other thoughts and blah blah blah. All of this is a distraction to the state of meditation, which is in the moment, totally present with being here now. Feeling this environment, seeing the ocean on that side, hearing the traffic behind me. You can probably hear that too. So consider these things as part of your study. This is the rest of the park where I'm sitting. Quite a nice place. Nice place to hang out and do some talks. So the next sutra, number 13, Patanjali mentions that of these two, the practices that we need to do in yoga, of which I've mentioned there are many, and then the non-attachment. The most important is the steadying of the mind through the practices of yoga. Of course, if you're detached from all the things of the world and whatnot, this becomes easier. But the actual techniques of working with visual concentration, working with sound, working with posture, working with breath, these are going to bring the mind to a standstill eventually. Now, in my experience, I have clearly seen that activation of deep breathing also activates the mind, and it brings in a review of what's in your mind. It starts bringing things up. The deeper you breathe, the more deeply you're going into the subconscious of your own memory, your own experiences. And this allows you to go into contemplation where you're looking at everything that has influenced you, looking at things that have happened, the events and possibly the traumas, which I see most people have had traumatic experiences. And we end up staying with that and need to understand what happened, why. When we understand that, we don't need to keep thinking about it. It doesn't remain as a trauma. It just becomes an experience, an educational experience. And this is an important part of our contemplation. The practices, the mental practices that require focus and concentration. Before that, we have this the limb, the fifth limb, that's called pratyahara. And that is withdrawing from the world, pulling away, closing your eyes so you're not looking at external stimulus, and you're not hearing all the sounds of the world around you. This allows you to go in, and you're not feeling anything particularly strong. You're simply going inward with feeling your body's processes, feeling the breath, for instance, and you're practicing the deeper breathing. So these are the stages and what we need to do, the practices that bring the mind eventually to a standstill, not necessarily easy, because we have had so much education, we have so much to think about. Not only so many things, so many theories, so many memories. So the practices, concentration, visual concentration, the focus on feeling sound, the practicing of the Om Japa that he mentions earlier, that can remove the obstacles. This is a reality of where we want to go, how we deal with this, and this focusing of the mind is the primary. This is our focus. This is our intention, and we need to work towards that intention by the practices. In the next sutra, he's saying, this is sutra number 14, practice becomes firmly established when it's well done for a long time. It becomes a habit, like daily eating and other things, and without a break and in all earnestness. Now we take a break, we do some yoga, and then we do something else, and then we go shopping, we go to a movie. My personal experience, again, at the Nanda Ashram, 6 months of non-stop yoga. 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, no weekends, no breaks. This brings you to confront yourself. And when you're applying the pratyahara, withdrawing from the world, which when you're living in an ashram, you're pretty withdrawn from all the activities that are happening out there. You go inward, more deeply inward, and you start to see and feel and have experiences that are very conducive to your own evolution. When you stop all of the external stimulus, we come to the fifth limb of yoga, which is the pratyahara. Withdrawal, and then you're turning inwards, and you're left with your mind, which is still thinking, still remembering, still having all these pictures of everything you've ever experienced. So you have to deal with this. And when you're looking at traumatic events that have affected you emotionally, mentally, you need to understand why this happened, what happened, why it happened. And when you get the lesson from it, you understand what is happening in your education. It's all about learning. And we learn from all of our experiences, and then put that together into our life's journey. And when you're on this yogic spiritual journey of going beyond, you need to understand what you're leaving behind. And without the understanding, your mind is going to keep bringing it up. So the contemplation part becomes pretty important. So practice becomes firmly established when it's done for a long time. Now that amount of time depends on your life and your lessons and how much you've done and your past lifetimes also, which is not always spoken of in Western world, but in the Eastern world, we know that it's lifetimes to actually gain access to these higher states of consciousness. Regular practice, long period of time. Then he mentions, going back to the other aspect, the non-attachment. Non-attachment liberates us from the cravings for objects either seen or unseen, heard about, coming up from memory. If you've ever gone window shopping, you walk through a mall, you walk down the street, you see these things. So non-attachment is not taking those seriously, the material things. There's always new toys, new gadgets, new exciting things that might be interesting to play with, but non-attachment, not thinking about this and letting it all go, liberates consciousness. And this enables us to go into these higher states. And from these higher states, we can look at the mind and see how it's working and pause it so that we can remain in these higher states, do something more useful with our time and our life. And again, it's about having these higher experiences. This is what Patanjali is talking about. The experiences in themselves bring us to this level of vibrational bliss, seeing the greater reality. Everything is made of sound, vibration, and it feels blissfully rewarding and happy. A state of happiness, a state of bliss, a state of ecstasy, and I refer to a state of orgasmic ecstasy, which is really good. It is fulfilling. And once you have this experience, the experiences of the material world kind of fall away. Not so important anymore, not so appealing or attractive, because you've had an experience that is better. And then your desire for this experience is motivating you to do the practices. There's a role and a purpose for the desires of the world. We are here in the material world, and our senses like to have the fulfillment of things of the world, good tasting, good sexual enjoyment, nice visual landscapes, etc. This is all part of the world. And actually, when we get to the stages of samadhi, Patanjali mentions this is one of the levels of samadhi, meditational state, is the real enjoyment while you're still thinking and partaking of things in the world. One stage of samadhi. In Sutra 16, he's saying, when there's no desire for elements of the material world, all the things, consciousness can be experienced in an expanded form. Again, going inwardly and having the inner experience, falling into the vibrational bliss is motivating enough. It allows the feeling to become the desirable aspect of your life. And then the material nature of things out there in the world become much less important. So having consciousness go into an expanded state, which is going into connection with Purusha, connection with the universal awareness, the blissful orgasmic state of the universe itself, without material manifestation. This is the reality that we can tap into, and then that pretty much nullifies or cancels all the desires for the little things in this material world, which are all very temporary. So having the experience then makes non-attachment very easy, because you have seen and felt something better.